All right. Hi, everybody. We are pleased to have Dr. Diane Rodriguez-Kiino from the Department of Educational Leadership here at Cal Lutheran joining us today and having a conversation about grant evaluation work. Diane, thank you so much for being here. Um, to lead us off, maybe you could do a quick introduction of yourself and also talk a little bit about your journey through grant-related work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. First of all, I do love talking about research and evaluation, so it's one of my favorite topics. Um, I'll just say that one thing, one like kind of starting with a piece of advice as grad students, just try to say yes to anything and everything that is possible for you, because that's how I kind of got to where I am today. So currently, my role is department chair for ed leadership. I'm also faculty in the doctoral program. I've been faculty for 15 years here at Cal Lutheran. And I'll be serving as the appointment rank and tenure chair next year at Cal Lutheran. It's a really wonderful position, and it's also because I said yes to an opportunity that was given to me. I'm a grant writer and grant evaluator, um, in addition to, the work that I do at Cal Lutheran. And most of that work, I would say a good 75% of it overlaps with my own area of research. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's a lovely position to be in where I can double up on like getting publications in my field, but also working on maybe like grant evaluation or working with new colleagues or working on new projects that I might not have even known about. So until I, had these collaborations. And I got into it because I did my PhD at USC, and then I went to Santa Barbara City College, and I was there for 2 years as director of diversity and equity in the president's office. And while I was there, I became really close friends with the director of research and evaluation at Santa Barbara City College. And she was actually leaving the college and starting what's called the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges. And she happened to do her PhD at SC. So, we became good friends. We knew we were trained very similarly at USC in the Rossier School of Education. And she said, "Would you mind evaluating a project for me?" And that's how I got into it. So, really, for 15 years, I've been a grant evaluator with the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges. And I can't even describe, like, it's almost, the opportunities that I've been given, the people I've met, the contacts, the collaborative process that I've been able to engage in. It's been life-changing because I never even knew I would love this work as much as I love it. But also just because of the people, right? Like the relationships that I've built. Like I have Cal Lutheran and all of those relationships and the faculty who I'm deeply connected to. But then I have this whole other like part of my life related to student success and research and the California Community College system, which is really near and dear to my heart because those students, for the most part, so many students need a lot of support, and I want to make sure they get it. So I'm like hell bent on making sure that they get it. So that's like my angle is I want to make sure underrepresented low income students are successful in higher ed, and I will do anything to make that happen. So that's how I got into the work, and that's why I stay in the work.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So many good nuggets there, certainly. And so this course that these students who are watching this discussion, right, it's about assessment, evaluation, and grant writing. And so there's a lot that's all packed in here in terms of, okay, how do we write student learning outcomes? How do we think about how to translate that into grants potentially, and the importance of grant applications, grant evaluation, how to measure learning. And so How do you distinguish assessment from evaluation from research? How do you sort of parse those out for yourself?
Yeah, so those are three big buckets, but they're all interrelated and then they all diverge. So I'll just like talk a little bit about that, give like a brief explanation. So an assessment would be like measuring something specific at a certain time. So like knowledge, skills, progress, like when we assess our students in class, right? Like we teach them, like if I'm an Algebra 1 teacher and I'm reviewing a chapter 5 in the Algebra 1 textbook, and then I'm giving them a chapter 5 exam test assessment. So that's examining their performance, knowledge, skills, like at a certain point in time. And then evaluation is making more of like a judgment call on like the worth, the merit, or the significance of like a larger project
Mhm.
or policy or uh, maybe like program. So the assessment, you might use an assessment and have that feed into the evaluation, but the evaluation is like a little bit bigger and broader than the assessment. Because remember, any of us can really give assessments. I mean, we as teachers, as faculty, as counselors, we're assessing all the time. So again, evaluation is about making like the judgment call on whether or not like this project, this program has like merit or significance. And then research is more systemic, right? It's more like holistic. So evaluation is pointed at like the project or the program. Research is, thinking about it in terms of like, more for the general good. And you're doing research or conducting research to test like knowledge, to test theories, to test formulas, and you're asking yourself like, what kind of generalizable information can I get from this to then apply in other settings? So, for example, um, I did a research project, not an evaluation, not an assessment, and the in an effort I do a lot of work in Asia and Japan specifically. So in the area of like women's empowerment, I did a research project on women's experiences with leadership in high school and college and how that translated to the leadership initiatives they might take when they're employed, like in their professions. So again, like that could be a little, that's bigger, broader, and maybe could be maybe could be generalized to another population, little pieces of it, not the whole thing. But yeah, that's how I would like parse out assessment, evaluation, and then research. And all three, like I said, feed into each other. So you'll use an assessment maybe in your evaluation plan, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Um, and evaluation is research. You are doing research, but again, it's not bigger, broader, and like more generalizable. And your audiences are different. That's another place where they diverge, right? So the audience for my Algebra 1 Chapter 5 assessment might be the students and their parents. Let's say it's ninth grade. And then the evaluation audience might be the funders who are funding this particular project. And it could all the stakeholders involved, including the funders. And then the research, it just depends, it depends on me personally, like where I want to publish the research. It depends on who might have connected me to the body of literature or research. For example, I feel like when I do work in Japan, I owe a lot to like the Japanese women's academic community because they support me, I support them. And so I might try to like push it out into my networks that way.
Sure.
But I would say that's a big point of divergence is like where all these audiences sit.
Yeah, that's great. And going to that depends piece again, like
Mhm.
as like a little bit of a follow-up, right? So during our first class session, one of the things that came up as a conversation amongst us as a group was, oftentimes one of the other factors involved in the differences between assessment and research, right? Is that oftentimes, of course, with research, we're going to probably need IRB approval and that sort of piece, right? Whereas assessment, largely oftentimes is not going to require IRB,
Right.
typically because it's more internal. But as somebody who, again, as you named in your introduction, like your research and the grant writing sort of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
coalesce and overlap, are there ways that you like make decisions about like, okay, I'm doing some grant evaluation work, but it also there may be pieces of this that may be like parts that would want to publish and like are there times that you have to make those decisions about going through IRB for some of that work or not?
Oh, oh yeah. And I will just say pro tip, err on the side of caution.
Mm,
So I was just on a 3-year grant evaluation project, which led to two incredibly like rewarding publications, and it was all on underrepresented low-income students who are in dual enrollment.
mm,
So my colleagues and I were hired about 4 years ago to track these dual enrollment programs in the state of California. We worked with 10 California community colleges. So this was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So Bill and Melinda Gates and Tipping Point and College Futures Foundation, I should say, all three funded the project. So they gave each community college a certain amount of funding, let's say $300,000. And that money was to fund students, low income, underrepresented students going into their dual enrollment programs, which were held on their college campuses. So they were recruiting from the local high schools. If we didn't want to publish at all, we probably didn't need to go through IRB, but that was never the case. From the first conversation, we're like, we are publishing all of this information. And we were pulling quantitative data. We wanted to interview. I do a lot of qualitative research. For that particular project, I probably interviewed at minimum 50 people. We did an IRB. We did 10 IRBs, and they have to be re-upped annually.
yeah.
We did 10 IRBs. We re-upped them annually because even if we got two publications or 10 publications, now I personally got two, but we got, I don't, maybe 20 overall. You have to have that IRB. You don't want anyone coming back to you saying, well, you didn't apply for IRB, or like, well, wasn't that, that's a little skeptical because you didn't file for IRB. And the thing is, where you apply for IRB is also a whole what do I want to say, can of worms.
Mm,
Because applying for IRB through LAUSD, which was one of our sites and one of our schools, that took months. So that delayed our entire evaluation. It
mhm,
delayed our entire project, but we could move forward with like the other ones that had given us the green light, and we could move forward. We just held on to hope that, and this is like, again, saying yes to every opportunity. I was like the IRB specialist in our crew of grant evaluators for it was called DE4EC, dual enrollment for equity completion. And it's all about being a diplomat,
mm,
and it's all about relationships. So you really have to be, you have to, and it's a lot of pressure to phrase it this way, but you need to be like almost all things to all people in that kind of context,
mm,
because they're not going to approve you if they don't think that you're capable and kind and you're going to treat their population with respect.
sure.
And knowing that is fine with me. I'm good with that. So yeah, that judgment call on IRB is always there,
Hmm.
every single project, and you have to ask yourself, do you want to publish or not?
Yeah.
Even if you think you don't want to publish, I don't know, it might be safe to just apply for IRB.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's super helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, so given again, you've sort of talked a little bit about this, but I'm maybe hoping there may be other examples that you could sort of share as stories. So, that piece about how do grant writers use assessment? How do they engage with evaluation? Are there, again, you've talked about a couple of the grants that you've been working on. Are there other pieces wrapped up in that might be helpful just for students to get a sense of like, especially at a college or university campus that they're working at, like how they might be thinking about either doing this work themselves or aligning and collaborating with others on campus around this type of work in assessment or grant writing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that collaboration piece is huge. And again, it's being a diplomat, right? So I'm in the field of education, though, like my area really is underrepresented students, most frequently in STEM and or the community college or the community college and STEM, which I love that. Um, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a kinesiology faculty member. I mean, and so for example, like STEM goes on and on. I mean, there's so much richness and depth to STEM. So um, I have to be a really strong collaborator with my STEM colleagues
Hmm.
to know about their work. I have to learn about their work. I have to understand what they're doing. I have to understand where they want to go. So essentially now, like because I kind of have this niche, people will reach out to me and say, we'd like to apply for this, this grant in STEM. So the example I'll use is Allies in STEM at Cal Lutheran, which was a $6 million grant. And I want to say we co-authored it. Maybe it could have been sunsetted like 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, so let's just say 7 years ago, maybe eight, we were working on it. So we have to use pre-existing data to prove a point, right? So you have to make your case. Well, the only way I can make my case on why we need this money from this was a U.S. Department of Education grant, but it could have easily come from, National Science Foundation or so these are big federal agencies that do not give money out, just like that. Like you gotta do your homework and almost like beg, borrow, and steal on a certain level. Um, and so the only way to get that grant done was for me to collaborate with many STEM faculty. And then there were cabinet members on this grant writing team, again, $6 million. And I was leading the evaluation piece of it. And remember, I only do qualitative. So one of the other things I did for that grant was I asked permission from, the grant writing team. Can we bring in a quant scholar who can be my counterpart? And they said yes. So that the quant qual team is really great when you can get two strong quant qual scholars in place because it can be almost like magical like that. We took everything they wanted to do and we put it into our evaluation. So, for example, let's say the biology faculty member said, on average, my GPA in bio 101 is 2.5 among Hispanic low income students. So then we have to have this whole brain. Okay, what would you like? This grant is to support underrepresented students of color in STEM. What difference do you, and she might say, I'd like all Hispanic low income students to achieve a 3.2 or above in Bio 101. Okay, so that's part of it is like defining measurable objectives, and that can only be done with your colleagues and like people who know what that is pre-existing. And you can collect it from like the IR office, institutional research, but it's also great to have the boots on the ground person. The person teaching Bio 101 needs to be in that room. So then instead of saying this grant will help low income students of color learn more, which you can say, that's too generalizable, it's too vague, it doesn't sell. You have to say, by the end of year one, low income Hispanic students at Cal Lutheran University will have achieved a 3.2 average GPA in Biology 101, right? And give yourself a little leg room, like say after a year.
Yep.
You can say after a fall semester, but you know, that's another thing is like, which I'll talk about in a minute, is like timeline and like breaking things up.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's kind of how you collaborate. You use pre-existing data. You want to demonstrate the need because again, the whole grant is about making your case
Yeah.
to get the funding.
Yeah. That's great. And so yeah, like let's move into that conversation about
Yeah.
timelines and evaluation plans. How do you start to craft that in a thoughtful, measurable way?
Yeah. So the very first thing you do, and it's hard because it's you're doing research on the grant itself before you even do research on what you want to do. So there's just so much, it's intense and it's research driven. And It requires a lot of commitment. So number one, don't work don't work on a grant that you don't believe in. I mean, I believe in all my grants. I never sit down to write a grant or work with a colleague on something that I don't believe in.
Hmm.
And again, all of my work is in supporting student outcomes in underrepresented low-income communities. So most and really in STEM, like I'm like, yes, let's do it. I'm again like saying yes. Like I'm like, absolutely. So the first thing is believe in the grant. The second thing is then go to that grant RFP, request for proposal, it's called, and read it line by line, and break it apart and ask yourself, can I do it? Is this going to work?
Yeah.
How can I envision this like unfolding? Now, oftentimes that'll be someone else approaching me saying, Diane, we have a new grant at Cal Lutheran called Teams that I worked on like maybe 2 to 3 years ago. And it's to support teacher candidates going into the STEM fields, going into our local public schools. So of course, I'm going to support that. So that grant was like brought to me. A whole team of people already believed in it, and I jumped on board and I believed in it too. Um, but they had already kind of outlined like what they wanted. Let's say they wanted 20 teacher candidates over, let's just say a 2-year period to focus on STEM and then be hired in the local public school system.
Hmm.
And to do that, we had to pay them money because the salary that they would make in the local public school system is significantly lower than what they would make in the STEM industry. And that was the whole point, is like we're providing these almost like stipends to these teacher candidates going into the local public schools. And so first we needed data on how many teacher candidates like in, let's say, SoCal and then Ventura County actually go into STEM, right there. How many teacher candidates at Cal Lutheran would even be interested in STEM? Can we recruit teacher candidates at Cal Lutheran to go into STEM? And how much of the stipend can we give to them? And what would be their obligation? So the team kind of came up with all of that, and I supported all of that work because then later we have to define again our measurable objectives and our evaluation questions. So once you read the grant proposal and you say, okay, I can do this, I want to do this, it's feasible to do this, then you kind of map out a plan. And then the evaluator really can't come in until that plan is almost like a little bit fleshed out and say, okay, then these are our evaluation questions. This is what we want to know to measure success in with this particular grant initiative.
Yeah.
And everything's time bound, right? Because let's say the grant is from 2022 to 2025.
Hmm.
So the evaluator is measuring pretty much on an annual basis, but also that would be more like, and then summative at the very end, but then formative is all along, right? Like, in fall I'm doing this, in spring I'm grabbing this data, maybe the following fall I'm interviewing teacher candidates. What are your experiences like? Again, the evaluation plan includes quant and qual,
Hmm.
and it's bound by time, the time period of the grant. You can't go beyond the grant, not a single day, um, because it's done, it's cut off, and everything has to be submitted to your funder
Hmm.
to prove that you executed fairly and objectively. And all along, you're meeting with your stakeholders to make sure that you're on track.
Hmm.
So again, first thing is make sure I believe in the grant. Second thing is sit down with my stakeholders to design the grant, um, design my evaluation questions, like really kind of identify or like, determine how much quantitative, how much qualitative, what goes into those decisions. Again, qualitative would be more the interviews, observations, focus groups, and the quantitative would be looking at like hard data, grabbing maybe student outcomes, looking at local test scores, if you're allowed, looking at student scores, but that's, anything with minors gets questionable.
Sure.
Um, and then the evaluator designs a plan around all of that.
Yeah. So a lot of reverse engineering, it sounds like.
Correct. It's all backwards mapping.
Yeah, yeah. And so to that piece that you just sort of were talking about in terms of like how much of it is qualitative, how much of it is quantitative,
Yeah.
like as a grant evaluator, are there particular ways that you try to be thoughtful about like what that balance is? And
Yeah.
is that sometimes dictated more by like the foundation or the agency who's giving the grant? Or how do you sort of make that work? Or
It's a great question. And what's fascinating about it, that question is that I love qualitative. So I'd love to think everyone wants to hear everyone's opinions about something.
sure.
But they don't. And even the greatest grant funder is like, show me the hard data. People want hard data. And what people want to see is success over comprehensively. So they want to see, and I don't blame them, they want to see a low income group of students trend upward on their math scores. That's what they want to see. And we can't always provide that because it doesn't always happen. So that's like sort of a cautionary tale within the context of answering this question is like, you might believe in the grant, grant might be doing a lot of good, but the grant might not be demonstrating success the way you imagined initially or the way the grant funders imagine. And so getting that up in your evaluation plan of like measurable success will look like X, but measurable success will also look like, right? And kind of flesh that out with your team. We, when I work on grants, I'm always working on qualitative, quantitative. It's both. Now I do qualitative, so we bring like a quant person in to like support, to be my counterpart, to be my other half. Um, Especially with these kinds of grants that are really like they're meaningful to someone's like life trajectory. I want to know how the grant we could have someone who's like, I never even thought of STEM, like was always an A student, but like I never even thought of STEM. We're not going to see an incremental growth in that student's maybe academic achievement. We're going to see it completely in their like psychological sort of state of mind of where they're like, this is where my career's going. Like my whole passion now has changed. And like I want those descriptions in my reporting out. Now, frequently it's up to the there's with federal grants you oftentimes have to go online and like there's like a box and they're like tell us the number of students who enrolled in biology 101. Okay, that's fine. Tell us what the GPA was in the fall. Tell us what the GPA was on the final exam. I mean, that's all very quantitative. And again, looking at it in more in aggregate, like me requesting data from IR, like send me all the scores of SAT scores from all of our Hispanic biology majors, and like there's that data as well.
Mhm.
And there's even bigger data sets that we use. But wherever I can add, Samantha reported out that, or like these five students said that
Mhm.
their career has changed, their career, I report that. I gather it and report it because it is important information. But I will say that a lot of funders, and I think in this kind of climate too, where education is constantly under surveillance and like under attack for sometimes like not being like, it's not as effective. Like, does everyone need a college diploma? Those are the kinds of sort of misconceptions that we're constantly up against.
Mhm.
I believe those stories, those narratives have a very significant place in grant reporting, and evaluators are often given um, that sort of leeway to like now add what add the information you want to add, and I add it in. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
collect both sides.
Absolutely. Well, and again, as you said, in different words, right? That context matters. Like the being able to sort of share that story, I think becomes incredibly important. Um, I know we're sort of wrapping up our time here, but I am curious. You opened with a little bit of advice for students when thinking about assessment and evaluation and saying yes to things, right, in their careers. Are there additional pieces of advice that you might offer as they think about doing some grant writing or doing assessment or evaluation work as a part of their work in the field?
Yeah, I mean, the number one piece of advice I will give to all of your students, all of our students, and it's advice that I was not given, and I even if I was, I probably didn't take it serious. I know I didn't take it seriously. In my PhD program, I had to take the number six statistics courses.
Mm,
I did not pay attention enough. I
mm,
didn't. And I didn't think it applied to me. And now it applies to me deeply. And I learn on the job and I've learned so much. And but had I been more aware of like, again, saying yes and being open to new possibilities in my own career 20 years ago, I would be in a better place right now with statistics. I don't feel I'm not like incredibly weak, but I do love working with my quant colleagues who have a different brain. So that's a good thing. It's a silver lining out of this. But if I had any advice, it would be really try to understand that quantitative qualitative balance,
mhm,
because there's like a synchronicity to it that's really special. And when you can nail that in a grant application, you're funded. It's the folks who are imbalanced and maybe place too much priority on like one side or the other. That's like kind of where you get in a little bit of trouble. But there's that, and like just make sure, again, going back to like your own like heart and center and who you are, work on things that you believe in, because if you do, there won't be any stopping you. I mean, you'll see it through to the end.
for sure. That's great advice. Well, thank you so much for your time today and all of this wonderful insight. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome, and I hope everyone enjoys this. And if you have any questions, I am always available.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.